Welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. It's going to be a wild ride.
Right, I want to go back in time a little bit to when you started the Cloud9 CSGO team, which people might know famously. You got the complexity lineup, which at the time they were like, it was weird at the time. There was the two teams. The iBuyPower ones were like really skilled and domestically they were good, but then the complexity ones were the ones that like at the majors would make like the playoffs, etc. Right, the timing of when you got these guys almost couldn't have been more perfect. So if people don't know, I remember the first major was the ESL Cologne one, and he brought in Shroud, and this team, this is actually one of the most brutal eliminations I've ever seen. Like, that major was wide open, and I know even those players, like, there was a world they thought they could have won that thing. Like, they were in position to beat the NIP team, which went on to win in kind of miraculous fashion. They're almost on their last legs with that lineup. Do you remember, like, I know you come from League of Legends, obviously. Was it a big gamble to get into CSGO? Was it kind of strange trying to chart, like, new territories? Where, because if you come from a game, you have the relationships already. You even have the player that you know which one to trust to tell you to get this player. I mean, if people watch the League of Legends one, there's a million times players telling you, get me that guy, and they don't even know they won't like him in a split. So what was it like, the gamble to go into CSGO? And it seems like early on it paid dividends.
So I met those guys at IEM Cologne, and that was the event. I don't remember the year, but that was the event that Virtus Pro won.
Katowice, you mean?
Oh, it's Katowice.
Yes.
Excuse me. That's right. It's Katowice. Because that's right. It was in Poland, and the crowd was absolutely nuts. I remember like where it all first started was they actually had this huge room with a bunch of like just like flip up tables, like just like that they had the players playing on them. They had them in these big circles where it'd be like four tables. It's this massive big circle, and one of these circles was all League of Legends players, like, and they were scrimming against other League of Legends teams. And on the other table was Counter-Strike, and they were actually playing matches. Like, this is so old school. It was so dirty, like, back then. And I was watching, like, these players, like, they'd be playing, you know, maybe 20 feet from each other, the teams, and they would be screaming at each other, like, during the match. Like, they'd get a round win, and they'd just be screaming at each other. I'm like, and versus League, which was much more tame. And I'm like, what's going on with these guys? These guys are crazy. Like, they're so excited. There was so much energy, and it was kind of infectious. I'm like, this game seems nuts. Like, there's so much like energy going on. So I went to go watch Virtus Pro win this event, and the crowd was just over the top excited. And I'm like, I got to know more about this game, because I watched the game. I didn't know anything really about it, but obviously within just a few games, I understood what was going on. I felt the passion of the crowd. I felt like an understanding, like, and saw the beauty of like the esport and how well it's paced, and like, and how exciting it is as a spectator. And I'm like, this is like lightning in a bottle. I need to get involved. So I started like poking around, and I got introduced to the complexity guys, and they seemed like, you know, really good dudes. And I was trying to understand, like, what does it cost to support a team? What is it like, you know, what does it take to operate one? And at the time, like, a team deal was like, we'll pay for your travel, and that's it. Like, they just made like the players, they'd get players like a hotel, and they'd pay for the airfare, and then they would split like the sticker money, or maybe even keep all the sticker money.
In the early days, they did, yeah.
I think they kept all the sticker money, and so the players were they were scraping by to get food. And I had already had a lot of success with my league team. Sponsors were rolling in, and I'm like, I can do much better than what you guys are doing. I can pay you like a good salary, like actual salary. They didn't even have salaries. And then I could pay you a salary, pay you well. Why don't we just split the sticker money 50-50? So you can like get the upside on that. And when I told the guys of this idea, they're like, oh my God, this sounds great. Yeah. But for me, it wasn't hard. It just kind of like, it wasn't expensive. And given the excitement around the game, I wanted to be a part of it, because I felt like it was really going somewhere. And so it was, I would say you're right. It was the perfect time where it wasn't expensive to get, it wasn't like overbearing to get into the scene. And the other teams at that time, you know, they didn't really know how to function in a way that was profitable. It wasn't like these teams were like scamming these players. There was just no money. They didn't know how to sell sponsorships. It wasn't like they were hoarding tons of cash. They had no cash. They were broke. And but I came in with a team that could actually function like as an actual like business unit that was able to package ourselves up and sell ourselves to sponsors, and I think could do it better than the other teams were. And so these guys jumped on board. They wanted to do it, and I was super excited. And the performances that we were having, we're basically beating expectations. The expectation was that we would always be awful, but we would be compete, and we would be able to punch people in the eye. And yeah, sometimes we would take some pretty terrible losses, but we would surprise people. And I think it captured like the hearts of a lot of people who watch Counter-Strike, seeing it. The people love an underdog situation. They love seeing a team rise up and do better than they are expected. And the personalities on the team were, super unique, really fun, really interactive. So like it was a complete package of where they were underdogs that would overperform, and also the players were super interesting personalities. And for me, I was able to contribute to the team in a way that really wasn't being done in the scene, and so I could make it easier life for them. So it was a really perfect time for us to get involved.
This will be a strange what-if angle, but I want to run it by you. So one of the players in that team was the aforementioned Shroud, who at the time, people were like, oh, he's like a big streamer in CSGO, which at the time meant nothing. CSGO was tiny. Yeah. I remember bloody Olaf Meister would turn his stream on and have like a few thousand, nowhere close to like double lift in League or whatever. Even though at the time he was the best player in Counter-Strike, it wasn't marketed very well, CS streaming. But I always wondered, in the team, there was some successes with Shroud. Had some second places and some deep runs. But I think he himself would probably acknowledge he never really met his potential. He seemed like a very skilled player at those games, but in the actual professional scene, he was often just an average player. What I always wondered is this: if you knew what you knew now, wouldn't you just essentially apply your ad skills and just make him the biggest streamer years earlier? Like, in some ways, he could have done that probably a year or two earlier.
Yeah, it's really tough to say because we didn't. The viewership of this sport, the way it grew so quickly, was a bit of a surprise, I think, to everybody involved. Yes. And I don't think the idea of just being a streamer was really a thing at that time. It obviously became a thing through his career with Cloud9, but that was, if I had known which direction things were going to be going, I potentially could have optimized more for a streaming type of situation. But to be honest, I made a conscious choice at some point that I wanted to be known as a team that was competitively one of the best in our region versus the best streamers. And I made a conscious choice to not hire a bunch of streamers. So that really wasn't my focus. And I really just wanted to have a team that competed the most. And I felt like it sent a really mixed message where people are doing contracts, and they still are actually, where they require players to stream a lot. And I just made the choice to not do that. I'm just going to focus on just trying to being the best team. And there's some pitfalls to that, because I think it does have some negative consequences on the popularity of your team. It requires you to play really well. But I didn't feel like I could do both well. And so I didn't ask my players to stream. And it also made the conversations, when it came to contracts, kind of interesting, because players will often say can you give me streaming bonuses? Can you add in dollars? Should I stream? And I was and it kind of took that out of the conversation. I'm look, if you want to stream, I think it's good for you. I think it's good for your career. You should do it. But I'm not gonna pay you against that, because that's not our focus. My focus is that you play well, and as long as you're able to play at the highest ability and your teammates feel like you're putting in the time and you're able to stream, go for it. But just understand that this contract is purely about performance on stage.
One player, in some ways, it's a little bit like the sneaky scenario, maybe. One player I've even told you myself over the years, I thought you were too loyal to, was Skadoodle. Now, look, you both got the last laugh in the end because he won the major, and he even went crazy in the major final and did play great. But I would have, if I'd have been the GM, I would have cut him about 4 times, probably 2 years earlier or something. Not least because he was another person who's a very unusual character. He's not just even though he's very skilled, he's not like a superstar player. He doesn't just set him down and then he just tears up the game, Seems like you have to have the right sort of maybe coach and in-game leader and teammates around him. What was why did you hold on to Skadoodle for so long? What were you seeing there?
Man, when you look back on those times, to be honest, NA development was even, back then is better than it is now. It's like absolutely gone at this point. But at that time, we still were facing those challenges for finding players. Like a lot of the top like players didn't want to come to North America because they didn't feel like they could compete at the highest level. And what's beautiful about a lot of these players is like money is great, and sometimes and often actually they're more interested in being on the best team and reaching the highest levels than taking the paycheck. And then the players that are willing to take that paycheck, you got to kind of be question mark, do they actually want to do this anymore? So like it wasn't as simple as like, oh, let me just grab a guy like Simple and just plug him into my team, because they wanted to compete on the highest level. And so it wasn't, I really was limited to the most part for just North American talent. And it wasn't really deep. The pool is it's shallower now than it was then. So it'd be even worse off today. And so this was a guy who we knew, who we trusted, who was better than anyone else in North America. And so he was the guy that we went with. And in the pandemic era, it all kind of mixed because every team was forced essentially to be in Europe, and that would have probably changed. Like if that team was in the pandemic era, it would have been a lot easier just to pick up a top European talent, because I'm not asking them to move. They could just stay at home and still compete. But at that time, it wasn't really that easy.
This might sound like a weird angle for people who've never heard this story before, because even some of it now might sound like you dodged a bullet. But I actually think this takes age fucking amazingly. If you remember during the time in 2017 when it was a bit more questionable of like, maybe it is time to transition off certain players, maybe the core needs to change in this lineup, like they'd hit a sort of time where they could have like a fluke run maybe, but they weren't going to be a top team. Look, even though obviously the team did go on to win the Boston Major and have some success, if you remember, what I told you was the move at the time was I knew at the time Valde, who at the time was a very good player from Denmark, he was like the next up and coming player, and he had a really great attitude, by the way. And then it might sound mad now because it's going to sound like it's aged badly, but I had a logic to this. The other player I said to get was HUNDEN, the infamous HUNDEN. And the logic I even had was you bring him in initially as an in-game leader, which he's not that skilled a player, but he was a very good like leader and stuff. And the idea would be he'd sort of teach the team the way, his system of how you're going to play. And then to me, it was always obvious. You just transition him to be a coach. So now he's just you don't have to worry about the game part. And then I always thought you could have had it where essentially between having Valde and having him, you could basically just get all the next Danish talent. So instead of like an Astralis getting that player, he just comes in the Cloud9, and then you'd have the perfect sort of import scenario. We could keep your 3 NA players. You'd keep having 2 really good Danish players. And this was sort of my vision as to how you could transform the team. Look, it didn't end up happening, but have you actually, I feel like people don't know in CSGO, you've tried a few international rosters, you've tried that approach, but you've thought of a lot of different angles to have success in CSGO, right? It hasn't just been, it has to be 5 NA players, or I'm sticking with this guy. There's a lot of moves didn't happen, or were on the table. And like you said earlier, you hinted at it. You've approached a lot of the big names from Europe. You know, when fans go, oh, why don't they get this player? It's like, mate, if you knew sometimes Team Liquid and Cloud9 ask that guy, he just doesn't want to call me. Maybe he wants to live in some country in the middle of Europe with his family, or maybe he's nervous about living in America for too long. There's different reasons why. So what would you say to this angle? There's a lot of different routes you could have gone, right?
I think it's interesting you bring up those guys in particular, because I was in talks with them, actually contract discussions, and got pretty close several times in bringing those guys out. Actually even prior to the major, because the honest truth is, like, at that time, that team had run its course. Like, I was certain that at that end of that major, that we were going to have some pretty significant roster changes, because the players were just getting on each other's nerves pretty bad at that point. But somehow we won that major. And it's really, after you win a major like that, it's really hard to
sure. Yeah, of course.
So we're like, we've got to see if we can make this thing work. We couldn't. But I, prior to the major, I was talking with Valde and HUNDEN about actually coming out and doing just what you're saying. But we're like, all right, let's get to this major and then kind of figure out how it goes. But we won the major, so that just kind of fell apart. So these are things, and definitely both myself and Steve are when we see top talent, we reach out, but NA is a tough sell. Right now, it's easier because the teams are in Europe. a lot, but at the time, like it was a big move for these guys, and our leagues in general have been pretty sketchy, and now they're gone. And so it was, these top town didn't want to come out. And so it's pretty interesting that, like, I do wonder, like, in another world, if we didn't win that major, I think it's very possible Valde could have come out and we started building like more of a Danish roster. And I definitely thought, like, Copenhagen office, that's not bad. We should think about that. And that could have, in another reality, that could have absolutely happened. It was these are things I actively discussed, like, not just like threw it out there, like, what's the cost? How can we make this happen? Would this work for you? Like, getting contracts reviewed, like we got close. But the reality of situations is, like, if you win a major, you don't make changes like that.
On the topic of winning the major, I mean, you said it up there that it wasn't even like people thought internally the team was going to win the major. But I can just tell, if the Cloud9 faithful get mad at me implying it wasn't supposed to happen, I'll just say, if you ever look, that specific team, FaZe Clan, I think they won something like the 3 times before they played this team and like the 4 times afterwards. The joke is the one time they ever lost was this one time in the major final. And as I'll point out a million times, they were at match point. Like, the championship, they had 4 chances to win it. And then even in overtime, it could have happened. So
I literally had like a speech in my mind ready to talk with the players about, like, how proud I was that I got this far. Like, I was like trying to prepare myself for the disappointment of us losing, and I had it all in my, like, planned out. Okay, this is what we'll do. We'll go to dinner together. We'll talk about this. And I kind of and the fact that we just kept fighting and pulled ourselves back and never winning. I was like, this is unbelievable. That was such an incredible moment. Definitely a highlight of. Even
though people might think it's a rude saying, that famous saying that says it's better to be lucky than good. It's what I always tell people if they tell me I'm crap at my job. It's like, well, you know what, just got lucky, didn't I? I'll just keep getting lucky all the fucking time. Like you say in the League of Legends one, Cloud9 had this crazy period from like 2015 to like 2019 or something, where aside from this CSGO tournament, you were always like second, even if you got in position or if you got close, it would always just go wrong. In a fucked up way, it must be satisfying to have one that just comes completely out of the blue and you just get to win everything, because that was a pretty sick moment where, if people don't know, it happened in Overwatch that year. You had it in League of Legends, the team got really good again, and then obviously now you'd won the major. So like, this had to be an amazing, it had to be one of the sort of nicest surprises ever in your career.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't come about because of just like it was, there was always an aspect of luck to these things. But the thing is, we've set ourselves up to get lucky so many times, and we just fell a little bit short. This one was a bit of more of a surprise to actually pull that one off, because that was a bigger ring to grab, a bit farther reach. But it comes with years of like putting teams in the position to be able to do it, and it happens. And that time happened like in an incredible fashion. Happening to be in Boston too, it was just everything kind of worked out for us well, and being lucky is a part of it. You have to recognize that.
People might not know this if they're more modern day, but the Flashpoint concept essentially was a remix of PEA, which was attempted in 2016, and I actually think if you look back now, the PEA one even made more sense, because it was going to be like, instead of like, we're hoping to get these, it was all the NA orgs were just going to get together. And at the time, the NA orgs actually had massive advantages in business. And even though people would have said, look, it's going to be like a second tier league though, it's like the business alone that could have changed Counter-Strike forever. Like, I don't think Counter-Strike would look like the same landscape. Do you ever look at that as the what if?
Yes. I feel like the PEA was my biggest failure in able to articulate what we're trying to build. Because I think it was really good for players, really good for talent, and really good for teams. And I don't think we explained it well. And obviously we didn't, because it got voted down. But when you think about the PEA, like, what we were asking was, we wanted to be able to have this one online league for just North America that we could guarantee to a sponsor or a streaming platform that would be exclusive to them. And we had YouTube and Twitch willing to spend millions of dollars. I think it was between $5 and $7 million to have this exclusive rights to have a North American online league. It was in conflict with what they needed, though, is they needed to have exclusivity. They couldn't have a competing league on ESL. So the players needed to say, we're just going to choose this league, but we'll make a lot of money from it. And what was really cool about what we're building is that from the get-go, we I told the other teams that are involved, is like, we need to give something really special to the talent and to the players for this to work. And we've never done this before, but let's like literally split 50-50 any profits that come out of this with the players and the talent. And we're going to make something that's massive for the future and kind of, claim our future. I don't think that we sold it well enough. I know we didn't sell it well enough to the players. I know a lot of talent was on board with doing this, but like the players just didn't get it. And what the players were thinking is like, why do I have to choose one? Why can't I just compete in PEA and ESL on League and get double the money? That sounds great. But it wasn't one of those situations where you could choose to do both, because if we participated in both, the money from the exclusive streaming rights just goes away. And so we put it to the players, like, choose which one you want to do. And they said, we want to do the ESL Pro League. We don't want to do the PEA League with the streaming deal. And so we shut it down. And then the millions of dollars went to ESL. And then I think the players were sort of shocked. We're like, okay, do I get a piece of that? And they're like, no, it costs us a lot of money to do this league. We're keeping all of this money. And I think that definitely was a bad outcome for everybody. And we're in a situation now where we don't have any North American leagues or anything. And so I feel like that was definitely a failure on us to explain it well. I also think we could have probably done a better job to work with ESL potentially. There's a lot of things I think we could have done better. But when I look back on it, I definitely feel like that was a moment we could have done something much better than we did. And it left a lot of people feeling, I think it felt like it left the players feeling like unhappy about not being able to claim their future. It left, I think, a lot of owners unhappy because we thought we were offering something that was really fair and good for everybody involved. And it just fell apart. So it was definitely, I look back at it, I'm like, wow, we could have done that a lot better than we did.
It feels like Counter-Strike, for all that you won the major and you only any org to do it, you've had a lot of those ones that are like the near misses in Counter-Strike. Like for me, the HenryG, Kassad, CSGO project, where they had all those big name players and there was a lot of money pumped into it. Like, I feel like that's one where no one could know the future. No one could know when we'd come back to lands. Like, if you could somehow have done that a year later and there's lands immediately, like some of those players are land players, but just on the internet, some of them were not motivated, or people remember back then, like the results almost felt like they were upside down sometimes. Some of the teams I remember there was teams getting put as number one in the world, mate, that like they could never even make a land final if they'd gone to one then or now, mate. So like, I feel like that's got to be one of the most brutal ones, because you really did go in on that one. And for those first months, like you were putting a lot behind it, but I can understand why you had to pull the plug over.
Yeah, that was another just like, whoa, that was I don't like the PA stuff. I could have done better. I feel like there were things in my control that we could have done better to make that more just more understandable for everybody. The Colossus explosion, I feel like, well, that's like an act of God situation where we look to build a super good LAN team, and the pandemic broke out, and I suddenly had players that North American players living in Serbia by themselves in an apartment in a place where they couldn't speak the country, completely separate the language, completely separated from everybody, miserable. And I couldn't, I was struggling to do, we were trying to do boot camps, and players couldn't, literally couldn't travel. They weren't allowed to travel internationally because of pandemic restrictions. And so it was such a difficult team to run, and we didn't know what events were running when, and this team was built to be able to perform on LAN. We couldn't really work together. And I was just like, I don't know how long this is going to last. It just kept dragging out. And I'm like, I got to pull the plug on this, because my players, I think they were going to quit if I didn't. And what it did what did allow us for me to bring Zeppa from that team onto my Valorant team.
That's true.
He's done incredibly well. But like that guy, and it's kind of crazy. He's been with me for a long time, and he's been through a lot for that situation. And it's pretty cool that he was able to transition to Valorant through all of that.
Right, obviously people will know you came back to CSGO, but through a very unusual route, which is you got the Russian team Gambit came over and became Cloud9. Now, this is one of those areas I've always thought, it's good that in the Monday we have all the charts and the graphs and we know what people's actual actions are, because every fan will tell you, no, I just want like players from my country and I want like underdogs, but then you look at it and like the numbers are incredibly cynical. It's like I always say about when people are talking about the NA talent in League of Legends, it's like, mate, do you see how hard people cheered for that Prince guy when they came? They weren't like, bring back X old player. They were like, he's the best. He's my new favourite player. So I always felt like everyone made out like it was a huge gamble that you don't have NA players in this lineup. To me, the reason why that's a good gamble is that team clearly does have the potential to win tournaments, to be a top team. And I feel like, look, they haven't done the big breakout of the major yet. If that team was to make like a major final or actually win a major, all the NA player fans would just immediately be a huge, all the old Cloud9 fans would be a huge CSGO fans, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, we saw like when they came to, they're actually in Dallas right now, but when they came out and won IEM Dallas, that place was pumping. It's in Texas, and no one cared where these players were from. They're part of an American team. They're screaming USA, like everyone is saying NA Counter-Strike is back. It was like, they didn't care where the players were from. They just wanted to see an org that they love winning. And I know that I'm oftentimes in the minority in this decision, but like I just want to support players that just want to play. I don't really care where they're from. If they want to win and they're passionate about winning, that I don't really see the nationality thing at all. I don't really care. But I know and I agree with you. Like when I see like when Berserker joined our team, everyone loves Berserker. When MNS joined our team, all of a sudden everybody loved this is a guy who is like hated in Europe.
Yes.
But what they do like is they like seeing, they love seeing underdog stories. They love seeing guys like turn it around and go from being like hated to suddenly getting success. And they love seeing their organization win. And so I feel that I feel like fans, if they see a player that's super dedicated to being the best, they are one of the best and they're putting in the time and they interface with them, they don't really care where they're from.
Right, one last question I have, and I'll be very delicate with how I phrase it, and you tell me how you want to answer it. It goes like this. In the League of Legends, when I referred to the fact that I once came and it's part of a sponsor obligation, I helped do some interviews with Cloud9 where I did like that lineup when Jensen joined with the other 4 classic players, and I did a series of interviews. When I was there, one of the people I actually met, I didn't even know you knew about esports, was your dad. He was actually at the LCS with us, and he was going around the team house, and I know obviously he recently passed. I wanted to ask this question. I'll be very delicate how I phrase it, which is one thing I think is amazing is when people actually get the chance for their parents to see them have success in life and to chart their own course and to build something. Like, can you tell me something? Was that, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So what would you say on this topic?
I think that that connection of loving esports and Cloud9 and working, because my dad basically ran our store for a long time. And he got to communicate with. Yeah, he got to communicate. He would write notes to the fans who were buying shirts and stuff. And he developed a relationship with our fans, and he had a really deep relationship with me and him and I enjoying these games all around the world. And that the ability for us to spend a significant amount of time together on something that I was building and him getting to like observe and enjoy that is definitely like a highlight of my life. And I'm so grateful that he was interested in what I was interested in and that he had joy watching us be successful and was there when things were bad to pick me up. And that's really special. And I think like every time I see, like, for instance, MCE, Matt, my Valorant head coach, his dad, Steven, came out for like several days to support Steven and cheer games on us. And when I get to see how proud his father is of him, it touched me. Like, I was just like, this is the same thing I had with my dad. It's so special. And I really like that Valorant's kind of been digging into a lot of like, the parents' stories, and we're seeing a lot of parents on the stage. And I think that's a deeply personal, moving event for the players when the parents get involved. And I think it's also very personal for the parents as well. And I got to experience that. I see a reflection of the relationship that I had with my dad and the way he supported me through Cloud9. And I absolutely love it. I treasure it. Like, the players will ask me, is it okay if my parents, come? I'm like, they must come. I want them here. They must come to our dinners and hang out with us. I need to know these people because I think I think it's super special that esports can be that bridge for parents, especially for parents who may have not really understood what the hell their kid was doing and weren't able to see their kid be some, maybe they weren't special at school, maybe they weren't incredible at traditional sports, but this is the thing that they're great at. Now they get to see, their child excelling, and that's really special for them and for their kid to get that recognition.
At the end of this interview, do you have a final message? Do you want to thank someone or say hello to someone?
Man. I think huge respect and thanks and gratitude to the fans who have supported me through the ups and downs, sometimes often not understanding the moves I've made at this point. They trust me. Like, they genuinely trust me that I'm doing the best for the team. And I recognize that and I really appreciate it. I think that I don't make moves for the team lightly. I'm always looking for our team to be the best, and they see that passion and dedication from me. So I just really want to thank the fans that have been supportive. Definitely, now we're talking about parents. I want to thank all the parents that support their kids and their story through esports, because these are things they're going to remember for the rest of their lives. So thank you to the fans, and thanks you to the parents.
Where I come from in England, people will often say, oh yeah, you and whose army? Well, I'll tell you what, I've got my own army backing me up. They're called the Skrilluminati. Thank you to HenryG, Joseph Adcock, Matt Pugnaccio-Racula, Theogony, Animosity, Bot Pounder 420, Jensen Gore, Tobias Bernasconi, Tosh, Toucan, and as always, a special thanks goes out to my boy Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? You want teasers? Find out who's in the upcoming interviews. Do you want to ask me a question in my monthly AMA? Maybe you want to be part of those long discussions where we talk about anything and everything in esports. Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and enlist today in the Skrilluminati via the Patreon link in the box below.